Today we have assembled here to do puja to Buddha. As you know, Buddha was a son of a king, and one day he was shocked to see a very poor man, thin man walking on the street, very unhappy person. And he felt very sad about it. Then he saw one person who was very sick and about to die. Then he saw a man who was dead, and people were carrying him to the cremation ground. This all upset him very much. And he started thinking about it and seeking what is the reason for all these happenings in human beings. Firstly, why do they become so miserable or sick, or why do they die so miserably? The reason he found out in his search, he went round the whole world, I should say, in the sense he read Upanishads, went to many gurus, went to many places of spiritual education, Banaras, everywhere he went. And ultimately, he was sitting under a banyan tree, when suddenly his Kundalini was awakened by his Adishakti, and he got his realization. Then he realized that the reason for all this is the desire. In Sahaja Yoga, we have now understood that all other desires are not pure desires. Firstly, whatever desires are fulfilled, we are not satisfied by it, first thing. And secondly, all these desires have a repercussion. So what is the pure desire? That you all know is the Kundalini. Kundalini is the power of pure desire which fulfills your pure desire to be the spirit, to be Buddha, to be enlightened. Buddha means a person who is enlightened. So Gautama became Buddha, as you people now have become Sahaja-yogis. But because he went through all these various penances, whatever he learned became part and parcel of him. But in Sahaja Yoga, it is all Sahaj. So we always conclude everything that this is after all Sahaj. And when we try to work out anything, we always say, oh, it will work out spontaneously, it's all right, Mother will do for us. This is a common feeling with Sahaja. So whether to put you all through that long process or to give you realization was a question before me. Because in these days of confusion, there cannot be much time to put you through all which Buddha had gone, and he was one individual, I had to put all of you. That would have been very difficult. I don't know how many would have sustained it. Most of them would have dropped out halfway, or maybe quarter of the way. So, it was done in a sahaj manner. You did not have to sit in a banyan tree. Ultimately, you got your realization. Your Kundalini was awakened. And you got your enlightenment. But that enlightenment which settled in Buddha is not settled in us because our chakras were not cleansed as he had cleansed his chakras. We had the same body, the same mind, and the same attitude when we got realization. As we were looking at the house of God, still we are looking at the house of God, but you have entered inside the house and you have to look out from the windows. This you forget. And though we are sitting now on a hilltop, out of all the congestion and all the traffic, still you see a car, you get frightened. You don't know you are sitting on top of a hill where your mother has put you nicely. And that is how you try to behave. When I get reports about Sahaja Yogis, I'm quite amazed that they do not know that they are realized souls now. That's why Buddha talked of desirelessness. It's not possible before realization. Even after realization, I find it's difficult. Some sort of a subtle desire exists, and where you have to work it out, we do not work it out saying that our ego will be catched. So wherever it suits us, we work that way. Wherever it suits, we work this way. The solution of the whole thing is one, which I found out myself, was this, that it's a collective happening. A person who is an individual can never get over his ego. Individualistic person cannot get over his ego. The one who lives individually, wants to enjoy everything individually, can never get over his ego because you have not gone through all that penances. Or else, if you are an individual, then you better go through all these penances and then come back. So the solution is to wash all our chakras, cleanse our life in the collective. And this is what was the solution of the problem of ego. Formerly, everybody worked out individually. Like that, to go to Himalayas, take some guru, then the guru will throw him out, then he'll go to another guru, then work there, then he'll throw it out. Then next life he'll be born again he'll be thrown out. Ultimately, if one guru accepts, all right, well, he's beaten up, he's tortured, he's treated everywhere, hanged upside down. And then, ultimately, if any guru gets nearer to any one individual, he would give him realization. This was the situation. But in Sahaja Yoga, the door is open, anybody can come in. Anybody. Get your realization. Because I have faith in collectivity. This collective life will definitely give you what Buddha got through his individual efforts. But there also we fail, that we do not know how to be collective. individualism is all the time around us. In every way, we think of individuals. Wherever collectivity has worked, Sahaja Yoga has prospered. And wherever it has not worked, there has been a problem. So it is very important that we should look at ourselves and see for ourselves and see how much collective we are. Do you enjoy collectivity or not? Are you aiming at collectivity or not? As soon as I thought of this Kabela place you have seen, and I thought that I'll make a little ashram there near the river for you. Immediately people said, Mother, is it all right if we buy our own houses here? Immediately. Then what is the purpose? And then they will call me, Mother, please come to my house for dinner. Please come to my little house for some tea. I'm not interested. So in Sahaja Yoga, unless and until you really become collective in every sense, you cannot ascend and you cannot wash yourself, you cannot cleanse yourself. This point he did not say, but in a way he did say, because he has said, Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. First I surrender myself to my self-realization. Then he said, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, means the dharma in me, I myself surrender to that dharma. That is spirituality. And thirdly, he said, Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. Sangha means collectivity. I surrender myself to the collectivity. But he did not know how to give Ama's realization at that time. So he got hold of disciples who had to shave off their heads, whether you are a queen or a king, who had to wear only one cloth, whether you are a man or a woman, who had to have only one mat to sleep in a big hall, no husband and wife, no marriage, nothing. And they had to beg their food in the village and feed the Guru, and also they themselves had to eat that food whether it was sufficient or not. That is not in Sahaja Yoga. Everything is enjoyable in Sahaja Yoga from the very beginning. And you are supposed to be absolutely joyous people in Sahaja Yoga. That is there. But the joy of the collectivity, if you do not know how to enjoy, then you cannot ascend. Because there's no other way out. What is the other penance? For some people, even collectivity is a penance till they start enjoying it. And they are very troublesome. This is not good, very critical. Some of them stay in the ashram and criticize everything all the time. This is not good, I don't like this, I don't like that. So here, in complete awareness, I mean, you cannot be mesmerized. If you are mesmerized, then you can live whatever way you like. But in complete awareness and full understanding, we have to become collective. This is one of the solutions for our cleansing. We can say like this, supposing my hands are dirty. So I go to one tap and I find there's one drop coming. So can't wash. So I go to another place, there's no water. Third place, I find there's nothing available. Ultimately, I reach the place where I find some water. Then I wash myself completely because I know I can't find it anywhere else. But in Sahaja Yoga, you are immersed in the water of collectivity. If you enjoy this collectivity and can swim in that, then there is no problem. Buddha, as you know, is working on our right side, on our Agya. It's very surprising the deity like him to work on the right side. First he said, for the right side you should be detached, desireless. I mean, nobody would work if they have no desire and if they have no way of earning something out of it, I mean, in the normal sense. But desirelessly you have to work. Then only the right side can be conquered. Very symbolic. Normally the right-sided people are extremely thin, but Buddha is very fat. Normally the right-sided people are extremely serious, very serious. Even if you tickle them, they won't laugh. But Buddha is laughing all the time with his both hands and enjoying himself. See the contrast. So, when you are working without any desire, only then this state can be achieved, that you'll be all the time laughing. But those who feel that we are doing this work with certain desire, I mean, some are very low-level people, want to make money, some this, that nonsense, that goes on. But it becomes even subtler and subtler and subtler. As you become subtler, the desires start becoming subtler and subtler and subtler. And if you are not careful, it just comes up. So he is the one who is on the right side placed going to the left side. He is the one who has said that you have to be desireless on the right side. What a contrast. Especially in the West, I have seen people do little bit of what have they done? I lifted that spoon. With the spoon they sit down. And they are surprised to see me that I am not tired. But I don't do anything. I have no desires. Actually, I never do anything. I am just nishkriya, I am just doing nothing. So when you become that instrument, surrendered instrument, when you know you are not doing anything whatsoever, then on the right side, you achieve mastery. How you achieve mastery? You don't do anything, all right? You go to any shop and you get a jackpot without doing anything. You do not desire anything. And suddenly you find, which you have never even thought of is before you, there sits there, available for you. Just have it. So, with a desire to achieve something when you work out, it also has a reaction. Every action has a reaction. But action without desire cannot have reaction because there's no desire already. Supposing I get lost somewhere on the way. So I never feel upset about it because maybe I have to be there. Supposing I want to I have to buy some, say like a castle, ticket like that. So people I have to buy, you see, that's different than desiring. I mean, it also came in my neck suddenly. I just said that I live in Italy, so must buy a house. They showed me a castle. And this turned out to be no good. All right, doesn't matter. Then the second one, everybody got attached. You must buy this at any cost. This. I somehow didn't like the place very much, but I said, all right, let their desire be fulfilled. It so happened that they were all uprooted and they had to buy another one which they didn't want to buy. And I was very happy about it because I didn't desire anything. And it turned out to be the best. The reason is whatever is best happens to me. So whatever happens to me, I know is the best. Is all for my good. Is for the good of Sahaja Yoga. Now anybody criticizes Sahaja Yoga is very, very good, excellent. Like in India, first of all, there was a magazine where Rajneesh used someone to speak against me. But that lady had stolen some of my photographs and had given the photographs as well. And everybody in my family was so angry, my brothers, my husband, they wanted to sue the paper. I said, I don't like this idea of suing the paper or anything. So when we had the first program in Delhi, it was so overcrowded that I could not even take my car inside. So the outside also was filled. And they had to put loudspeakers outside the hall. And I asked the people, how is it they are here? They said, we saw your photographs in the Illustrated Weekly and we were so much impressed. They never read anything. Not a word. And they were all there. One of them is Harsh, and so many of them have come from there. Just seeing the photograph. So if she had stolen the photograph, it was for our good. And normally we would have paid a lot of money to publish something. Without paying any money, it was there. And then these people, you see, my family people, they saw that this magazine was closed for 6 months and they had to go into a terrible loss. I didn't desire that either. When you are desireless, you are happy because you are never disappointed. You are never nervous. So, to be desireless doesn't mean that you become something absurd or ascetic or anything like that. But not to expect something. If I do like this, then this will happen. If I do like this, that will. Not to worry. Do what you want to do. One thing you should know, that nothing bad can happen to you. and something bad is happening, that's something wrong. I'll tell you another thing. This time, first time I fell down a little bit, not much. So they said you can't go out of the house at all, you cannot move out because it's raining and you will develop arthritis. I can never develop anything like that, but doesn't matter. So I was made to stay in the house and I wrote this book in that. It was nice, I fell down. Otherwise they would have said, come here, come, all my family was there for a holiday. Thank God. I got these 4 or 5 days, I wrote this book. So make the best of all disappointments. If there is a disappointment, just smile at it. I know it is for your good to discover something new, to find out something better. But the conditioning is so strong. That's why I say be in the collective. Now, for example, we have Indians, we have got French, we have this, that, and all that. All their conditions are around them, still. For Indians must have Indian food, wherever they go. It's a very difficult situation. That way, you people are better, you eat every sort of, even you eat wretched Indian food. I don't like very much Indian food myself. It's not very nourishing. It's more tasty, but not nourishing. But you don't mind eating any food whatsoever. That's a good thing about it. But your desires are another, little different, which you know very well, I need not tell you. Like I told ladies not to carry too many cosmetics and heavy things with them. But whenever they come, the men break their hands picking up their big suitcases. I'm not saying that you should walk about in a manner that is not so decent, but for that, keep to minimum. Or else there is a competition with the leader, always somebody will be there. But in the West, what I find, not so much for food, but for house, even in India. If you marry an Indian wife, she'll try, or a Greek wife also, will try to keep the husband to herself. It's a common thing, I've seen it. They are something like Indians. And they spoil the ascent of the husband and theirs also. It's a fact. And very dominating. Indian women won't be dominating, but they will try to control the husband, to have another house of their own. But they don't know, Indians don't know collectivity. They are very individualistic. Now, with Sahaja Yoga, of course, they are learning gradually how to be one with others. Moreover, culturally, some people are different. So they stick on to their own culture. Of course, whatever is good in any culture should be taken, because whatever is universal culture is in Sahaja Yoga. But so many things there are where we just falter because of our conditionings. And that's why at the same time we had another great incarnation of Mahavira, who's pointed out what are the punishments for people who indulge into their conditionings. Many horrible things he has talked about. What will happen to people if they have their conditioning? Where will they end up? What will be their situation? What kind of hell they will get? This is being described, horrible things. Of course, I'm not going to tell about that today. But common thing about him and all his contemporary, like Buddha, Kabira, and all these people, there was one thing common which came that they, not Kabira so much as Buddha, that is better not even to talk about God, but to talk about abstract, about formless. Because the worst condition in those days was that once they started worshipping any deity or anything, they became complete slaves of that. Like Muhammad Sahib also said, he talked of Nirakar. But these two went even beyond that and they talked, there's no God. Better not talk of God just now. Better get your self-realization. I did the same in the beginning. I said, get your self-realization. Because anybody can start, I am God. So they never talked about God. Not at all. And they all the time said that there is no God, but it is yourself. They tabooed actually. They are called as Nirishwaras. Nirishwarvad. Did not believe. Both of them did not believe in God, but in self-realization. They knew that I had to come and tell you about it. So Buddha has talked about the future Buddha, which is Matraya. Ma is mother, who is in three forms. Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati. Any Buddhist, if you ask him to ask the question of Matraya, he gets his realization just there. So he talked of Matraya because he knew that when Matraya will come, she will have to tell people about Ishvara. According to them, the people had not yet reached that stage that you could tell them about Ishvara. So they said there is no God. Just to accentuate self-realization. Atma-gyan, knowledge about yourself, self-realization. And early Buddhists, I am told, of course they were Bhikshukas, they were ascetics, but they had the experience of the cool breeze of the Holy Ghost. Just like the Gnostics, I think. But there were very few. There are not as many as you are, but quality-wise they are very high. Because all of them had come through that terrible penances. So quality-wise they were very high. And because the difference between them and others, the quality-wise, was so much that they could not impress the others, and so just it died out, I should say. But still we had Zen, where Viditama is another disciple of Christ, went down, of Buddha went down, and Tao. These two are the ones which are expressing Buddha's ideals about Sajo. Tao is nothing but Sajo. Tao means how it works out. And Zen system, Zen means dhyana. So they also believed in raising the Kundalini. They did not hit at that time anybody's spinal cord, but later on they started hitting people's spinal cord with some stick to put them into that. So Tao and Zen both are offshoots of the same Buddhism, in the real sense of the word I should say, of their ascent, without talking about Ishvara, about God. But aims were the same, to become Buddha, but they also died out. I met the head of the Zen who came to me for curing. I asked him, I said, how is it you are the leader, you are not even a Kashyapa? Kashyapa is the one who is a realized soul. So he told me, confessed to me, they had only 26 Kashyapas throughout. And only after the 6th century they started, and very few were there, and it has died out. That means how lucky you are that you are all realized souls. So for our banyan tree is the collectivity. We have to make ourselves subtler beings, to be one with the collective. And that is very enjoyable, very beautiful. Those who cannot do it, cannot progress in Sahaja Yoga, they are problematic and they create problems and they trouble everyone. Their attention is bad and no one knows how they stand. So Buddha's message is, of course, is not to develop ego. But how do you do that? First of all, whatever you are doing, you have to say, I am not doing it. It's Mother who is doing it, or God who is doing it. I am not doing anything. But if you feel that you are doing something for Sahaja Yoga, it's better you stop doing it. But you should say, it came my way, I didn't do anything, I was just there, that's all. Then you have achieved a great deal. And the second thing is of desire. Even desire of anything, of smallest thing or the biggest thing, or even loving your children, loving your wife, this, mine, all those things. All these desires, if they are not fulfilled, you feel frustrated, then you must know that there is something wrong with it. But if you understand the sense of collectivity, then you can ascend very fast. I would say Indians are extremely religious, disciplined people in a way. But they are lacking in collectivity. If they could come up to collectivity, they can shoot off. The only nation which I have found very good is Russia. Because of communism, they are collective and desireless. Because all their desires were fulfilled by communistic ideas. They didn't have any choices left. And also they were collective. In a way, communism has suited the public, not the government. While the other way around, democracy has suited the government to make money, but the public has suffered. So we are people who have not been able to know about collectivity. So I would say the collectivity develops faster in the West, no doubt, much faster. But desirelessness is less. So it's like somebody has the teeth and somebody has the food sort of a thing. If we can see ourselves as we are and try to understand that either we have this problem or that problem, if you could just somehow or other neutralize this one-sided problem, you could be there. Because if you solve one, you can go to another, from there to there. But just to stand in the center and see for yourself, what are my desires? Count them one by one. I mean, if I have to think what is my desire, I become thoughtless. Really, my position is horrible. If I have to think, what should I desire now? I become thoughtless. Sometimes I develop some ego. I don't know from where to start. Must have some ego after all. Everybody has, so why not me? I don't know how to start it. Then, we also have these conditionings of developing this horrible thing called guilt. I mean, it's another, at the time of Buddha, nobody had this problem, I think. This is a modern technique to feel guilty. Some sort of a modernism in it, because I don't know how it is worked out. And this modernism of this horrible thing called guilty is something really has come to my lot to clear out, not at the time of Buddha. He never had this. Otherwise he would have paved way for me, but that he did not. He's left it to me to clear out your left Vishuddhis and mine also all the time hurting me here. So this horrible thing, especially Western mind, Indians don't have guilt to it, nothing. But this has to be overcome. As you know, that Buddha and Mahavira both support the center of Agya. So, if you have to have a very clear-cut Agya Chakra, then on one side, you should be desireless. You should forgive. Ksham. Ksham is the Bija mantra, is to forgive. Bija mantra of right side. Ksham, I forgive. And the left side is hum. Like the left-sided person always feels, oh, I'm no good. This, he has to say, no, I'm good. Hum, I am. So hum and ksham, these are two bija mantras which we have to say. Of course, if you say, they will act, because after all, now your pranas have become pranavas. Your breath has become enlightened. But rather weak, I should say. It doesn't matter. Your mantras can act. You must use these two bija mantras to clear out your agyas. But Mahavira has a solution for this, that after realization, if you catch your agya, you get a terrible headache. That's Mahavira style. You do anything wrong, you get punishment. You indulge into anything, you are punished. You go against Sahaja Yoga, you are punished. I am not doing it, it's Mahavira. Simultaneously working. If you try to be overly smart, you are outsmart. So these two forces are working from the right, left, left to right. If you overdo right, then the left hits you hard. If you overdo left, then the right hits you hard. Both of them are really like double-pronged attacks. One says don't have desire. All right, you have desire. Punished. This side. Like some people say, I must have children, I must have children. You give them the children, they say, Mother, why this horrible child you have given me is such a horrible child. Then somebody says, Mother, give me a lady from, say, Maharashtra. Recently there was a case like that. She was bothering too much, Mother, give me one lady from Maharashtra. And a real special style came to punish. They said, no more from Maharashtra. And she was really, I've never heard of such a woman in Maharashtra. Horrible. Because she was insisting on it, so she had it. She says, no more from Maharashtra. No, I said, everybody is excellent. This was an exceptional case, came just to punish you. So to have any desires, if you cross a certain limit, you are punished, and that is done by Mahavira. In a small way or a big way. Like there was a little boy who came to London, very bombastic. And he wanted to buy something for himself. I took him to an ordinary shop, and there was a very nice coat, full wool and all that. He wouldn't buy. I want to go to a big shop. I said, all right. So I said, I'm not coming. I sent his father. He came back with an artificial coat from that shop, without knowing that it was artificial. Because he wouldn't take something from an ordinary shop. So in the big shop, very nicely, big price they gave, and this they got. Every minute, Sahaja Yogis must know that there is a Mahavira sitting round. Also, Buddha is there who gives you an indication that don't do this. Do not desire so much. He puts limitations to you. But if you don't listen, then all right, Mahavira is there to correct you. Up to a point he goes. Then you get headaches. Then you say, Mother, why did I get headaches? You asked for it. It's such an automatic machinery that we have to be very careful as Sahaja Yogis. So today's understanding should be that we all should become collective from inside. We should not grudge or grumble about it, and enjoy the collectivity. But the second side of collectivity is this, that do not try to exploit the collectivity. Otherwise you will be in trouble. Like I've seen some people don't know how to use their bathrooms. When you are collective, you have to be respecting the collectivity of others. By your presence, another person should not by any chance suffer, or should not feel in any way insulted or inconvenienced. So when you are in the collective, it should be such that another person should enjoy your company, enjoy your being there. That's something where there is no problem. But if you are demanding and if you are asking for things and you think no end of yourself, you can not at all collective by any chance, but you will suffer for that. Automatically you will suffer. If this is realized and understood properly, your agya is solved. anger. People always boast, I'm very angry with you. Boast. But just make that anger into forgiveness. And you'll see the person, instead of you getting into problems, he will get into problems. Anger will upset you, but forgiveness will upset him automatically. It's the biggest weapon you have got, is to forgive. And this is shown in Buddha's character throughout. And this will give you self-respect. That you are not disturbed by anything. Like a ship has to be seaworthy. If you put the ship on the sea and if it breaks, what's the use of making a ship? What's the use of a Sahaja-yogi who gets disturbed at every moment? You have to be seaworthy. And if you are seaworthy, nothing can disturb you, all right. The elephant is barking and the dogs are barking. All right, let them bark, what does matter? The elephant looks this side like that, sometimes takes some water and blesses them with water. All right, quieten down, so that your head will be cooled down. That will give you self-esteem, and you will know what you are much higher than others. And this is what is how to get rid of your ego, which is a very, very big problem according to you people. But then how to get rid of ego. Ego can be said, you go. When this I-ness goes away, the self rises. What is there to feel hurt? What is there to feel bad? What is there to hurt others? All right, you are cheated. Very good, at least you have not cheated anyone. Be happy about it. But once you are without ego, means you have surrendered yourself. No one can cheat you. Can you understand that? No one can cheat you. Because there is some higher force which is looking after. This is the way we should understand Buddha. This is, we should know our Buddha qualities. This is how our ego can be dissolved. When you say, Mother, we surrender to you, that just means that you give this horrible ego a complete holiday. It means that. That is how this ego disappears. I think all your just now, ragas are open out, most of you, somehow. And then you laugh at everything. You make fun of yourself. Just enjoy everything. May God bless you. Can I have some water, please?